Welcome to the Canadian Principal Learning Network podcast. This is our second episode in our newest series of podcasts from the 2016 Congress of the Humanities and Social Sciences. On today's episode, you'll hear my interview with Dr. Claire Lapointe, a professor and researcher at Laval University. Dr. Claire Lapointe gives advice for leaders on building teams that promote equity and social justice in education and dealing with conflict effectively as a team. Dr. Lapointe is an avid traveler and discusses her research into how educational administration and leadership systems differ in a socio-cultural perspective from country to country. Thank you for listening to the Canadian Principal Learning Network podcast. If you have any questions, comments, or compliments after you listen to us, feel free to send an email to us at cpln@cpln.info. And we'd be happy to hear your comments. That would be great. The Canadian Principal Learning Network is hosted and produced by me, Kristin Schmidt. It is a collaboration with the Canadian Principal Learning Network and the University of Ottawa, supervised by Dr. Stephanie Chitpin. Now, let's get started with Dr. Claire Lapointe.
So my name is Claire Lapointe. I'm from Quebec City. That's where I was born and grew up until the age of 5. And then my father was a school inspector, which was part of the Quebec school system until the mid-60s, because it was borrowed from the from France school system, which the school system in Quebec really was partly based on the French school system from France and the North American, more like English school system. Anyway, so my father was a school inspector, so we lived 2 years in the north of Quebec, and then we lived 2 years in Montreal, then came back to Quebec City, and I was a preschool educator, and then went to Africa.
Oh, wow.
I traveled, yes. I lived in French Polynesia for a year, New Zealand a year. With my husband, we really liked traveling. Before getting married, I had lived 1 year in Germany. I got very interested in the different perspectives, cultural perspectives on education, and how, depending on the culture of a country, some things are the same, but some things are very different. So it means you have a choice. Mm-hmm. There's not only one way of doing things and doing things right. So the cultural perspective. So I decided to at some point I decided to do a master's degree in educational administration, looking at the influence of cultures on school systems and administration of school systems. And then I just continued with my PhD, and at 40 I became a university professor. Before that I lived 7 years in Africa as well.
Oh, wow.
Working in education and economic development.
Excellent.
So I became a university professor at 40. At the University of Moncton, in New Brunswick, so a French language university. I was there for 9 years, and then we moved back to Quebec City, and I was hired at Laval University, and that's where I've been now for 12 years.
Lovely.
Yeah. And of course, my field of teaching and research is educational administration and leadership from a socio-cultural perspective.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
It's an if question. If you had a monetary grant to affect positive change in education, what would you fund?
I would fund experiences and organizational endeavors in the school system at the grassroots level, aiming at making sure that we have really equitable school systems, which we don't have anymore. Mm-hmm. Which we were in Canada in general, in Quebec in particular, we had arrived at a school system where there was no link between achievement and engagement and things like that and socioeconomic background. In the early 2000s, there was big data demonstrating that in Quebec we had achieved both quality and equity. But we're going backwards, and it's in many countries in the Western world, we are losing ground So that's what I would do. I would put money into developing an understanding and an awareness of what is real equity and equality in education. What does it take to make sure that all children have access to that? What prevents, what stops it, what damages equity, so that we can rebuild or build educational school systems that are really equitable for every group, even if they are very small, like the First Nations and Aboriginal Canadians, for example.
Yes.
They are very small, very, very small proportion of the Canadian population, but they have a right to have an educational system that belongs to them, but that and gives them at the same time the same opportunities that youth from other backgrounds have.
Wow.
So that's where I would put the money. Yeah.
So on that strain, what do you think will be the most important developments in research in educational leadership in the next 5 years or so?
Well, I know that there is an important trend of research based on practice and action research and oriented towards social justice. I know it's there. It's not. I think it needs. I think if we could really gather a lot of much more data from different methodological, gathered from different methodological um, instruments and approaches, not just quantitative, not just qualitative, all, and put it together all over Canada, all over North America, all over the Western world, all over the world, like if we could really, so that we would have some strong leads, strong directions, or on what should be done and what do we need to stop doing, because it's really hurting. It's really like factors that impede social, excellent school system that are also really equitable. We need to understand more of that. So I think there's some work being done there. I'm not sure within the next 5 years we're going to see so much.
Yeah.
Because I don't think it's going to be one of the biggest. What was the question? The word?
Development.
Development. But with the work that's being done right now, mostly between North America and Europe, there's a big group of this movement of researchers, scholars, and practitioners working together to learn about that. I think it's going to be one of the main developments.
Awesome. Thank you.
Within the next 5 years. I hope so.
I like that you mentioned what we should stop doing.
Yes.
Because that's something we always think, what next, what next, what next, what next?
There's things that we need to stop doing.
That's really interesting.
And we don't. And it's going to take some courage.
Can you think of an example?
Well, in the Quebec school province, Quebec and Ontario, I really remind people, in Ontario, private schools exist, but parents have to pay. If that's their choice, they have to pay to send their children to private schools. So you see in Quebec, because of that, we really have two parallel school systems. Mm-hmm. And now we are gathering data that demonstrates that by doing that, that is probably the main factor that is preventing us from going further than 80% of student achievement. Like the goal was 80 and we're almost there. But they are saying, well, Ontario has 85%. Let's do things the way Ontario does. Okay, that means not funding private schools. They look at other things. They don't look at that.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It's very political.
Okay, so this one is more on your leadership style.
Okay.
So what was one of the biggest misunderstandings you've had as a leader? Take a second to think about it.
Well, I guess because of my personality and upbringing, my parents are very much into, as a young couple, they were very much as Catholics into the theology of liberation movement, Freire and social justice, and yes, it's part of me. And my personality, I'm also caring and very empathic and so on. So when I became a school leader, I'm not a school leader because I never was a school director or anything, but I became an administrator at the university level quite early. And also when I was managing a fund in Gabon, my justice part, what are the rules, what are the policies, what do the laws say? I tended not to look too much okay, is this kid part of a discriminated against group, or what happened to that particular parent and kid? So I was, because I work in ethical leadership now, and so I was very much into ethic of critique and ethic of care. And my ethic of justice was very low.
Oh.
So that was my weakness.
Yeah.
And when I started working with this colleague of mine who did her PhD with Jerry Starrett and started using these 3 dimensions of ethics, I realized, oh my gosh, I really need to look into, I need to also use the ethic of justice. And now it's better.
I can understand that so much.
Really?
Oh my gosh, I'm like that too.
Yeah.
Miss, he did this. Well, stop doing it, but I can't, you have to get to the consequence and all that stuff. And yeah.
So I find that model that Starrett proposed in 1991, it was theoretical. And Lise Langlois, who was doing her PhD at Laval University, we were master's students at the same time. We became very close friends. She was the first one to verify it. She was the first one to take the theoretical model and do interviews and ethical dilemmas and try and see, okay, how do they look at these 3 dimensions? Is there a 4th dimension? Are there only 2 of the 3? And she found the 3 dimensions, and she also documented how they go through resolving an ethical dilemma as school principals or superintendents and so on. And she's been doing research on that since then. And we started working together as researchers in 2002. So I've learned a lot as a leader myself through that research.
Oh, wow.
It was like my guinea pig, my own guinea pig.
What are you working on now in your leadership style?
We're still, you mean as a leader?
Yeah.
Balancing the 3 and knowing when it's time. What do you do? Well, yes, okay, yeah. When it's time to make a decision on, okay, I've been caring, and the person has he or she has taken advantage of me being very caring, or I've been looking at the situation with a critical perspective a little too much. Now, if I don't act, if I don't tell the person, okay, now this needs to stop, this needs to change, now you need to do, I need to make this or that decision with regard to your job and faculty members, then if I don't do that, I'm creating injustice. Oh. And I found that, yes, it takes courage, but it's not so much courage. It's going to be messy. It's going to take time. It's going to take energy and time. So you need to be ready. Okay, now I'm going to say, no, that's done. That's finished. We're not going that way anymore, that road. It didn't work. So now I really need you to do this and this and this and this. And that's it. Because that's what the agreement says. If we compare your working load to the colleagues in the department, you're not really doing your share.
Weight, eh? Yeah.
Exactly. So that when you come at that point, that's where I am now. Now I need to learn to do that. And okay, it's going to be messy and it's going to be tiring maybe, but I need to go that way. Yeah, I think that's, and humility, always humility.
Yeah.
Oh yes. Yeah. Always I keep coming back to, okay, that was okay, but I could have done it much better. I could have managed this thing here much better. I could have thought about this here. Oh, I forgot about that. So always be humble and realize that, oh my gosh, there's so much to learn all the time. So
have you started using your things you've learned in leadership within your marriage?
Oh yeah, very early on, and with the kids, with the children.
Did you find yourself being too empathetic with your children?
Yes.
And how you have to learn to be just?
Just, yes. But then if you're a couple, then of course you need to be just, and you try and be, but sometimes when one of our sons, we have 3 sons, one of them went through a very challenging teenage
Adolescence.
adolescence.
Yeah.
And I was too caring. I just could not go with the consequence route, and my husband could. So as a couple, I told him, okay, then you do that, and I trust you, and I know that's what we need to do now. I cannot do it, so you do it, and it worked.
Yay!
Yes, took a few years, but
that's
it
good.
worked. Yes.
Do you find you have other colleagues that help you to fill in that role as well?
Yeah,
in work?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's what Lise Langlois says, that the best is to be a team. And if you know that you're mostly caring, try and find someone who's very much justice and another person who's critique. You know, we all try to have the three dimensions, but we're always stronger in one or two. And there's always one that's going to be our weak point. So she says, create a team where you have these three strengths together.
I love that.
Yeah.
Triangle is the strongest structure, right?
Yes.
So.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, I'll tell her that. We'll coach
some elementary
you
math for you.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Yes.
Yeah.
The pyramid. Yeah.
It's really nice.
I'll tell her that. That's good.
That's all the questions I have for you
Okay.
now. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for asking me.
Well, another interview has come to its end. Thank you so much for listening to the Canadian Principal Learning Network podcast. I look forward to bringing you a few more episodes from the Congress of the Humanities and Social Sciences. If you have any questions, comments, or compliments, you can email us at cpln@cpln.info. Feel free to also comment below. The Canadian Principal Learning Network podcast is hosted and produced by me, Kristin Schmidt. It is a collaboration with the Canadian Principal Learning Network and the University of Ottawa, supervised by Dr. Stephanie Chitpin. Special thanks to Dr. Claire Lapointe for her thoughtful interview. Thanks for listening.
When I do research, when I do interviews, people, we always think that people we're asking them to give us time and they're so busy and but they always say, I never stop. I never take the time to stop and think about those things, and you asked me to stop and do that, and I feel so good.
Oh, yay!
Because I've realized that's true. That's what they tell us. I've realized what I have accomplished, what I've learned, how I've been helpful to people or my organization. So,